Ann Arbor City Council has scheduled a special election for August 2025. This will be the first odd-year August election in the city since 2017. These elections were removed from the regular calendar because the timing engages so few voters. This August, a small number of voters will decide if publicly owned land on this city block will be given away for $1 and redeveloped into privately owned high-rises. In April 2017, a majority of City Council, led by Mayor Christopher Taylor, approved the sale of city-owned property at 319 South 5th, adjacent to the downtown library. As approved by City Council, development rights on city-owned land would have been sold to the private developer Core Spaces. Core Spaces planned to construct a 17-story high-rise building consistent with downtown core zoning. The new development would lease 196 on-site parking spaces from the city, about 1/4 of the total spaces available at Library Lane Parking Garage. In public discussion, council members and other advocates emphasized their support of the sale so that the city could collect $10 million, some of which was promised to support affordable housing.
We have to challenge the narrative that this is an insignificant amount of money. That is simply untrue. These funds could potentially be leveraged to create anywhere from 200 to 500 apartments for households at or below 60% AMI.
For me, one of my highest values is affordable housing, getting money for that funding.
Because this property was owned by the city, residents pointed out that the city had choices in how it would be developed, at whatever preferred size and scale. Council members emphasized that the size and scale of the proposed building, 17 stories, was necessary in order to extract the maximum sale price.
One of them offered us $1.6 million for the property. That's cutting our amount of money that's going to affordable housing by $3.5 to $4.2 million. If we don't have this money, we don't provide housing for people who need it.
Sometimes I feel like I'm getting asks from residents, like I'm talking to my children, who want and want and want. And I understand why that's insulting. But I think you need to understand some of our frustration that we get emails that say, smaller building, more money.
In April 2018, over 5,000 signatures were submitted to the Ann Arbor City Clerk in order to get a question on the November ballot about this parcel of city-owned land. The ballot question would designate the city-owned land as the center of the city, to be developed as a public park and civic commons. Approval of center of the city would dedicate the city-owned land at Library Lane to public purposes so that it could not be sold. The center of the city question was officially added to the November 2018 ballot. However, in July, Mayor Taylor led a majority of council in approving extra language for the ballot. The extra language was described as an explanatory caption. The so-called caption was significantly longer than the ballot question. It emphasized the money to be gained if the land was sold, and emphasized the money promised to affordable housing. Local attorneys warned council that such a caption was argumentative and illegal.
Even if the council could add such a caption, which it cannot, the language proposed by council is neither a caption nor an explanation, but rather an argument designed to undercut fair consideration of the proposal. I want to emphasize, I'm not taking a position, I don't know whether I'm going to vote for it, but it's really an insult to the voters, and it's a violation of the law, and you're going to get sued.
In discussion, council repeated the sale price and money provided for affordable housing.
Our Ann Arbor Housing Commission, who's responsible for housing the neediest among us, has said we need this $5 million. That we're going to use this, we're going to leverage this $5 million in state and federal funding to build housing for 200 to 300 people.
In a split vote, the caption was approved. After the vote, the county clerk raised concerns in a public comment.
I recognize what's happening here, but I think that this is not the first city council that has dealt with an initiated proposal that they didn't like, that they wanted to add language to the ballot. And my experience, my things that I certainly have seen in the past is that the AG's office doesn't accept changes if they regard the original language as being sufficient.
The caption was challenged, and the Michigan State Court of Appeals rejected it. The court opinion declared that Mayor Taylor and a majority of City Council had exceeded legal discretion, and that the caption advocated for a specific outcome. The ballot caption approved by Mayor Taylor and his allies was declared null and void. In 2018, MLive described the charter amendment as a grassroots push for a downtown Central Park. The Center of the City Charter Amendment was approved despite an aggressive public campaign against it. 36 households funded opposition to the charter amendment. As reported by MLive, a majority of the opposition's funding came from a handful of large donors, including $5,000 from now former Councilmember Lynn Song and $5,000 from University Regent Mark Bernstein. Current Councilmember Dharma Ackman also donated. In 2018, Mayor Taylor argued that instead of a civic commons, the property should be sold for $10 million and the proceeds leveraged to fund affordable housing. Current Councilmember Jen Iyer acted as spokesperson for opposition efforts and organized thousands of anti-Prop A mailers, declaring that the loss of this $10 million would hurt children, cause streets to crumble, compromise public safety, and stifle investment in public transit. The ballot question establishing center of the city was ultimately approved by more than 26,000 voters, just over 53%. Voter turnout was 54%. About 29% of registered voters in Ann Arbor approved the establishment of center of the city. When voters approved the charter amendment, Taylor complained that the city had lost $10 million. 6 months after elections in November 2018, Council considered establishing a task force to discuss implementation of the charter amendment. Given the divisiveness of campaigns and lingering resentment, it was proposed that this task force intentionally include people who supported the concept. In response to that suggestion, then Councilmember Chip Smith had this to say.
I don't think people that don't support, anybody that doesn't support this concept isn't going to apply to be on this committee. Let's have some faith in our neighbors and our community that, the people that apply to do this and volunteer their services are doing so with the best of intentions.
Smith, who did not support the concept, did apply to be on the committee and was appointed. Smith can be seen here with other members of the task force. Even with persistent opposition from Smith and other elected leaders, the task force moved forward, conducted a survey, and generated a report. The number one recommendation of that task force: establish a Council of the Commons to decide next steps. When Council was asked to vote on this task force recommendation, establishing Council of the Commons, Smith voted against it. Since 2018, the city has delayed and ignored requests for a memorandum of understanding with Center of the City. This is an important document that would recognize the city charter amendment approved by over 26,000 voters. In 2020, then Councilmember Julie Grand acknowledged that a memorandum of understanding was key to a successful fundraising effort for Center of the City.
We have an excellent, for lack of better term, skate park model to follow, which after some time and a group resulted in a memorandum of understanding with the city that spoke both to plans for a site and a means of funding them.
6 months later, then Councilmember Lynn Song referenced the skate park's success in fundraising as proof that the center of the city should receive no public support.
Private donors come forward with matching grants dedicated to actually coming up with the money beforehand, from everything from kids selling, working at bake sales, selling bricks at the skate park, Rotary members coming up with, personal matches. I would love to see that kind of enthusiasm, given that this was a mandate supported by thousands more voters than who were, supportive of the skate park. Philanthropy is a difficult thing, especially during a pandemic.
Song correctly pointed out that the skate park was not approved by thousands of voters. However, even without the benefit of over 26,000 voters authorizing it, the City Council of 2008 approved a memorandum of intent with the skate park, clarifying that a skate park committee was in collaboration with the city. The terms of that agreement confirmed that the city had gifted the skate park a location at Veterans Memorial Park. The skate park had not yet organized any formal 501c3 organization, but the city granted it a full year to establish one. In 2009, the Ann Arbor News reported on the skate park committee's intent to raise $1 million in 2 years. The memorandum of intent with the city ultimately led to the County Parks Department awarding the skate park $400,000 in matching funds. In 2010, the skate park had raised only $40,000 in private funds. However, with matching funds from the county, they claimed a total of $80,000. In 2013, Current Magazine reported that in addition to public funds from the county, the skate park had been awarded $300,000 in public funds from the state. In July 2024, then Councilmember Song again attempted to compare center of the city to the skate park.
Let me also thank the folks who had organized the 10th anniversary for the Ann Arbor Skate Park. These things take so long to organize. The folks who came out for the 10th anniversary were children when they first started organizing. To fundraise for $100,000, that was a commitment to the city in order for that park to happen. As we consider another park in the city, and the $70,000 commitment they're supposed to come through, perhaps they can speak to these now adults who spent time fundraising, selling brownies, selling t-shirts, decorating skateboards, doing everything that he could to advocate for the skate park.
She was apparently not aware of how the skate park had leaned on city funding when their own private fundraising failed. In 2017, the president of the skate park committee announced that they were now raising money for outdoor lights at the skate park. 3 years later, a city staff memo referred to those private fundraising efforts as having only started. 1 month before COVID lockdowns, the city allocated $100,000 to pay for outdoor lights at the skate park. As the crisis of the pandemic diminished, the Council of the Commons actively worked on fundraising for center of the city. In 2021, City Council approved a budget amendment, $40,000 to partially fund planning and design of center of the city. The total cost of planning and design was estimated at $120,000. Private donations were being collected to make up the difference.
We have $40,000 in the city allocation. We have $20,000 commitment from Library Green. And we're working on an additional $30,000 to get us to $90,000 of the $120,000. So if you can follow me on that. Many of you may know this. I don't know if this happened before the last meeting or not, but we have 2 additional commitments totaling 2 $5,000 commitments. This would give us a total of $70,000. One of those $5,000 commitments is conditional on us raising the remaining 20 of that $30,000 piece that we're working on. Heather, you and I talked a week or so ago that in your time with the city, this is pretty unusual to have this much outside funding involved in a study that really anchored within the city government.
Even without the benefit of a city memorandum, improvements and activation continued at center of the city. A nonprofit 501c3 called Library Green Conservancy supported efforts. Volunteers organized events, planted gardens, and installed murals there. By spring of 2023, over $70,000 had been raised. The goal was the development of a park similar to what exists in places like Royal Oak and Detroit, and similar to what is currently being planned in places like Saline and Chelsea. In 2022, City Council approved a resolution directing staff to explore the feasibility of allowing food trucks at center of the city, as has been allowed at other city properties, notably Almendinger Park and at the Farmers Market, where the city promotes and advertises the trucks. Allocating space for temporary food trucks was among action steps recommended in the 2020 Task Force report. Councilmember Briggs explained the resolution approved by Council.
Staff will be looking at that and coming back with a recommendation around sort of what the cost would be, operational model, different things like that. Obviously, we've all seen sort of food truck courts in different spots, and something that could easily activate that space for a while.
In response to the council resolution, then Assistant City Administrator John Fournier wrote a 9-page memo aggressively arguing that food trucks would be prohibitively expensive. The memo claimed that food trucks once a week would require a full-time staff member. Inflating costs further, the memo falsely claimed that any use of the lot would have to pay parking fees. Fournier's arguments included amateur legal analysis. The memo avoided pinning down actual expenses. Instead, it offered a hypothetical laundry list of expensive features to guesstimate an exorbitant annual cost of $130,000. The memo concluded with the remarkable claim that the property could not host any activity of any sort. This memo pleased council members who opposed implementation of the city charter amendment.
I want to thank staff for the AC1 memo. I thought that it was thorough and really well presented.
Mayor Taylor and his supporters have consistently dismissed the results of the November 2018 election. Weeks after the community vote, loud voices began arguing that the results were not decisive and the charter amendment need not be implemented.
I think it was a slim majority, and I don't think you can dismiss out of hand the 47% of Ann Arbor residents that voted against Proposal A. I think if the vote was in favor was 55% or more, I might agree with the center of the city library lot folks.
More recently, others have simply pretended that an election never happened.
4 years ago, a small group of anti-development activists called Library Green successfully amended the city's charter to preserve a downtown parking lot forever as a park. The city has given Library Green a fair and full opportunity to deliver on what it said it was going to do. 4 years to raise money. They haven't raised the money. They don't have a plan to do it. I'm speaking to you tonight because I'm independently passionate about this issue. I was a taxpayer, I was a resident, I was not involved in city politics. This is something that really drew me in because of how indefensible and shocking it was.
Since that 2018 election, this public commenter and his spouse have made over $14,000 in campaign contributions to the current roster of sitting council members, the mayor, and city campaigns endorsed by the mayor. On social media in 2022, he collaborated with another wealthy resident, boasting that they would generate enough money to decide a council election in Ward 1. In another forum, that campaign donor made the surprising claim that no controversy existed around high-rise development of center of the city, despite 5,000 signatures on petitions and over 26,000 votes cast in support of a park.
This is where we need to activate our downtown. Seeing that and realizing that we had this uncontroversial plan that Prop A in 2018 more or less stomped on and interrupted and broke was surprising to me.
In that conversation, the current president of the Ann Arbor Library Board discounted the results of the November 2018 election, insisting that the issue was still undetermined.
And then there were some people who were very opposed to the idea of housing. And I would argue that they're really probably a pretty small minority here, but they were very loud and very effective. And they put forward a charter amendment on the ballot, which passed in 2018. And it's been several years. There's still just a parking lot there. And now we're talking about, okay, so what's next? What can we do next?
The campaign donor also discounted the 2018 election.
And right now, when you have the debate with folks who want to follow through with the Proposal A vision for the library lot, which is some privately funded or publicly funded park, they claim a mandate that they don't have.
He recommended a do-over election.
It's arguably an open question on whether voters want to pay for the multi-million-dollar project that they want to put on this site. And I think we deserve some clarity around that, and the sooner we get it, the better.
Ironically, he asserted that a Democratic election should be decisive.
If I lose, if my side loses the fight, or the Democratic fight, if we make our case and voters say, you know what, I really want a public park on that site, then council can get to work doing the thing that the voters have said they want to do. I hope that doesn't happen.
In 2024, the mayor appointed him to the City Planning Commission. The property at center of the city is adjacent to the downtown branch of the Ann Arbor District Library. The Ann Arbor District Library is governed by an elected board whose current president has dismissed anyone who supports a downtown park as simply opposed to housing. In November 2024, the director of the Ann Arbor District Library hosted a public meeting and presented a plan for rezoning so that the library could enter into a public-private partnership for a high-rise development. When asked specifically about collaborating with efforts at center of the city or making use of the property, he said this.
The library doesn't typically make plans for other people's property. We're not in control of that, and the charter language doesn't seem to allow that sort of usage. So I think those are two significant issues. At this point, we're focused on this property that we're in control of and seeking the rezoning of that site.
6 days after making that statement, the library director had a scheduled meeting with the Ann Arbor City Administrator. The topic of that meeting, the property at center of the city. Soon after, the Ann Arbor City Administrator reported to City Council that he had been approached by the library about pursuing a transaction of the property at center of the city. He emphasized that their interest was in earnest. This communication marked a dramatic shift in how city leaders discussed the value of center of the city. As recently as 2023, the mayor and his allies continued to repeat the talking point that the city property should have been sold for millions of dollars in revenue.
We had an agreement with a developer in 2017 that would have brought in $10 million into the city, half of which was going to affordable housing and the other half was going to be dedicated to paying down the debt from the Y lot repurchase.
In 2025, that talking point was wholly abandoned. In January 2025, Council directed the city administrator to negotiate the transfer of city property at center of the city to the Ann Arbor District Library. The council resolution argued that efforts to develop the center of the city into a civic commons had failed to gather sufficient funds, and therefore it should be abandoned. The resolution described the library's interest in expanding its own high-rise development plans to incorporate the city property known as Center of the City. The president of the 501c3 Library Green Conservancy offered a public comment.
Since 2018, the Library Green Conservancy has raised private funds to support establishing the center of the city as a place that will invigorate Ann Arbor, that will be the welcoming urban place of interest, entertainment, and community engagement for Ann Arbor's future. In 2018, 26,752 voters expressed their support for establishing the center of the city. That charter amendment referendum wasn't just another public opinion poll that you can take or leave. We pledged $70,000 to match the $40,000 that council allocated in 2021. The DC2 resolution criticizes the adequacy of fundraising for the center of the city, although no one representing the city has asked for discussions about funds. We know, as you do, that our fundraising efforts are constrained by the lack of an MOU, an agreement that will signal to donors and grantors that the city is committed to implementing the center of the city.
In late February, the city issued a press release in which Mayor Taylor expressed excitement about selling the property for $1. The following week, council unanimously approved 2 ballot questions, one to repeal the 2018 charter amendment for center of the city, and one to approve the transfer of the property to the Ann Arbor District Library for $1. Both questions will appear on the August 2025 ballot. This timing is intentional and strategic when voter turnout will be at its lowest. Ann Arbor no longer elects council members in odd years, specifically because these elections engage so few voters. In 2016, City Council directed a community vote to amend the city charter and eliminate these odd-year elections. At the time, the city clerk was asked to provide data illustrating differences in voter turnout. This chart illustrates the drastic difference between an odd-year August and even-year November election. Even-year November elections, like the one that approved the 2018 city charter amendment, offer the highest voter turnout. Odd-year August elections, like the one City Council has directed to repeal the 2018 charter amendment, generate the lowest voter turnout. As part of her analysis, the city clerk also estimated the cost of holding these odd-year city elections. In 2016, Mayor Christopher Taylor supported the cost-saving and higher voter turnout of even-year elections. This year, he supports the special election that City Council has directed to happen in an odd year this August. The city clerk estimated in 2016 that an odd-year August election costs $45,000, assuming voters engaged in only 3 of the 5 wards. The cost of this year's city-wide special election has not been publicized. If the ballot proposals A and B are approved, the city-owned property at center of the city will be transferred to the library for $1. Once transferred, the library board can unilaterally sell or dispose of the property. Several current members of the library board, as well as the current library director, have previously endorsed its sale. In May 2025, Council considered a rezoning to allow for private ownership of the downtown Ann Arbor District Library. The library property is currently zoned public land. This zoning category permits the construction of any building of whatever size, so long as the property remains in public ownership with normal principal and incidental uses of government functions and services. Once rezoned, the property can be sold and library services will no longer be required as a primary function or use. At the City Planning Commission, the library director explained how a rezoning to D1 or downtown core would facilitate a high-rise in a public-private partnership.
Public lands precludes private ownership and private development. So we wanted to have this hurdle out of the way before we started talking to potential development partners.
The library property is adjacent to the city-owned property designated by charter amendment as center of the city. The center of the city is already zoned D1 or downtown core. In November 2024, the library director implied that once the downtown branch was redeveloped as a high-rise, library space would increase to satisfy demand.
We're in a situation where we basically determined that this library building is no longer suitable to the library's needs. We are continually capacity constrained almost every day. The library space that we have, when it's used at peak capacity, we are bursting at the seams.
The rezoning will permit library property to be sold into private ownership so that public library services are no longer the primary function or use. If center of the city is transferred to the library, both properties can be sold for private high-rise development. This year, the library conducted a survey of visitors. 95% of respondents reported that meeting space at the library was available whenever they needed it. The survey also asked about a reimagined library. When prompted with specific ideas, the second most popular amenity was a safe space for children to play outside, like what could be developed at the center of the city. In an open-ended question, without prompting, 63% of respondents could think of nothing that might be added to the current library. In May 2025, the library announced that the downtown branch, the same property that 6 months earlier was bursting at the seams, had extra space available for rent at a deep discount. A March memo from the city administrator sums up relevant details about the plan to give away city property and what the community can expect in a new library. The city property will be given to the library for $1. It would then be developed outside of city direction, like any other privately owned property. The library would sell the property as well as its own to a private developer. Private developers would build towers at maximum height, at least 15 stories. Library services will occupy only one floor of these towers. That single floor must also include an event space promised to the city. Finally, the memo anticipates a $50,000 campaign to promote the ballot questions that must be approved in order to facilitate the deal. This month, City Council members sent mailers to constituents that included information about the August ballot questions. These mailers were funded by taxpayers with new city budget that Council approved last year and again this year. Explanation on the mailers is similar to the 2018 language that was declared illegal as a ballot caption. If Prop A and Prop B are approved, both the city-owned land at center of the city and the rezoned downtown library property will be sold and redeveloped as private high-rises. The last time Ann Arbor held an August election in an odd year, a total of only 10,000 city voters participated, about 14% turnout. This August, the ballot questions may be decided by as few as 5,000 voters. It will reverse the policy approved by over 26,000 voters in 2018. As happened in 2018, big money is promoting high-rise development on the city-owned property. Preliminary reports show that nearly $40,000 was raised from mostly large donors. For the purpose of giving away public assets for private development, this campaign is on track to spend the $50,000 predicted in the city administrator's memo, about $10 per vote. If you would like to learn more about efforts to implement the city charter amendment approved in 2018, visit the links in the description of this video.